They're 1 week away from the NFL draft, and of course, the Bears are in their second week of off-season workouts. They've been afforded an extra week because of the change in the coaching staff, but that has not stopped people from freaking out. As a matter of fact, the Chicago Tribune's Brad Biggs reported today. In fact, he actually tweeted this out. He said, and I quote, "Expect a choppy moments with a new staff and a playbook, but today's minicamp practice would generously be described as a rough ride for quarterback Justin Fields, especially in 7-on-7 drills or 7-on-7, a drill heavily tilted toward to the favor of the offense." And of course, Bears fans are very reasonable. They took this in a bad way, as you would expect, and I understand the panicky nature of this fan base, but at the same time, I took a moment to look back at some of the articles that were written last year about Joe Burrow. People were worried that he was going to fail. People had written off Jamar Chase as a bust as late as August. So Bears fans, we're working through a process here. We've still got a long, long way to go, but we don't have a long way to start the show. So Sammy, why don't you go ahead and roll that animation?
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It is going to be sick. Welcome to the show. I am Adam Rank, and later today we will be joined by Connor Orr of Sports Illustrated. But first, before we do that, I do want to go back and kind of just take a moment again to go over what is happening right now with the Bears. A new coaching staff, a new everything, it seems, and this is kind of a rookie year for Justin Fields. And again, one of the great things about living in this day and age is that we have so much access to everybody, to every practice. We know everything that's going on. It's not just the guys who work for The Athletic and the Chicago Tribune and the Sun-Times. It's everybody. Everybody's out there and everybody's over-reporting. These things happen all the time. It takes a little bit of work. You just can't expect this team to be operating like Aaron Rodgers and his team, which has had the same offense for a number of years now and it has been playing in this league for a long time. It's not the reality of the situation. So I know that we're all panicking and everybody's, is Justin Fields a bust? We're a year into this. And even that, like last year, probably shouldn't even count. But here we are wondering what the direction of the Bears is going to be. And I understand, again, like it's been a long time. We're tired of getting beat up by the Green Bay Packers each and every year. But this is a process that is being set in place to allow us to be successful for a large number, for a long time, hopefully. And that's what we're trying to do and what we're trying to work through. So, I remember this too, and I'll even bring up this. I know that I mentioned Joe Burrow as an example. As everybody knows, I'm also an Angels fan. And I remember when Shohei Ohtani was going through his first spring training, people thought that he was garbage, thought it was not going to translate, that the Angels had spent way too much money. Dodger fans were making fun of the Angels. Like, I'm glad we dodged a bullet. Glad we didn't sign that guy. You know what? I was dropping my daughter off at school today, and a Dodger fan was like, "Can't wait for Ohtani to be a Dodger." I'm like, first of all, you clown. You don't have to sign every good player in the world. And number two, you guys thought he was a bust after one spring training. So let's give this a little bit of time. Let's have some patience. And, speaking of patience, we're going to be bringing on a guest today. As a matter of fact, you know what? He is one of my former colleagues at the NFL Media Group, where he was a building block for the Around the NFL brand. He jumped ship to Sports Illustrated, where he became probably my favorite Sports Illustrated writer, doing his thing on the Monday Morning Quarterback brand. His most recent article is Why Your College Mascots Are All Wrong. It's hilarious. You need to go check that out. But I know you probably know him more for a story he wrote last week, a story titled "The Bears Are Garbage and Justin Fields Should Leave These Clowns," although I might be projecting just a little bit. But please welcome to the show, my friend, everybody, Connor Orr. Connor, did I get the headline wrong? I'm sorry.
You nailed it. The SEO and everything. Yeah, you got it perfectly right. Yeah.
Everything. How are you? First of all, how have you been? It's been a while since we've been in each other's presence. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a long time since Super Bowl 50, the last time we hung out in person. A lot's changed in the world since then.
It really has. You know, we were talking about that a little bit before the show started. It was the last time I think us as a full group, and I think of the full group with the Around the NFL guys, including the late great Chris Wessling, and how wonderful that Super Bowl was. Although you didn't have a seat, and they sent you back to go and purchase alcohol. Not only did you purchase alcohol, we ended up getting kicked. Like they tried to kick us out of the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I had the presence of mind to be like, you can't, we're guests at this hotel. This is the lobby. The lobby never closes. And they're like, well, you got to leave. And we went around the corner, found some tables and a couple of bottles of Patron that you had procured. And it turned out to be a pretty good night.
Great night. I remember fondly Chris Wessling and I screaming, keep pounding, the Carolina Panthers fan refrain. And
God.
we just, for no reason at all, just kept hollering it late into the night. That was a very fond memory.
There's always a reason. When Chris would get on when Chris would get on one, it was a sight to behold. He's a fun hang regardless of what's going on. You're going to Panda Express to have lunch. He's fun. When you get a couple of drinks in him, like some people, when you get alcohol in them, you don't know. Yeah, Chris somehow he aged well, like a fine vintage wine. He got better. So that was a lot of fun. So it's been a long time since I've seen you. So I'm happy that you were able to jump on with us here today. And obviously you're kind of bemused by the attention you've received from the Bears fans, which I don't know if you're not a newbie to this business. So I think you should know how this is going to be received. But I do want to start off with the overall general theme of the article, which is that the NFL should have a transfer portal, which is interesting to me because when you look at what's happened in the NFL during the offseason, Russell Wilson transferred, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel seems to be the latest. Doesn't it feel like the transfer portal is already here?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is I think you need a certain amount of cachet, right? And there's no vehicle for, I wrote this about Justin Fields last year too, so here's why I'm surprised by the attention the article got. Last year, I wrote that Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence specifically, but rookie quarterbacks in general should not be ashamed or afraid to request trades because, this was after the Browns game where Justin Fields got absolutely demolished. Trevor Lawrence was dealing with Urban Meyer. I think if you're a rookie quarterback, you should be able to go to your agent, go to the team and just be like, this is my workplace. This is how I'm going to build the rest of my life. And this is not working out for me. Just like you and I would, if we went to a job and literally we walked in and half the building was on fire, would probably not want to stay there, And so I've always just kind of been an advocate for, especially quarterbacks, this ability to sort of just get out, and you should be able to get out if there's a tanking situation, which I'm not accusing the Bears of doing, getting out if there's a offensive situation that doesn't suit you. Like, people are saying this is soft, this is whatever, but you would anybody listening, anybody reading that article would do the same thing if this was going on in their workplace too.
Yeah. If you went to go work at Target, and all of a sudden they made you do something that was out of your job description or do something that's dangerous, put you in harm's way, which I guess you could kind of reason the Bears did last year. Well, this is the thing. And honestly, I ask everybody, and I know that I jokingly referred to what the headline was all about. I'm going to pull a quote out from your story to show everybody, like, this isn't anti-Bears per se, because although you do mention Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence, but Justin Fields is the focal point of this story. But here's what you wrote. Poles is doing what any smart general manager would do. He's not throwing irresponsible money at the situation. He's not sacrificing future draft capital. He is, in fact, trading away players like Khalil Mack to acquire more capital. This is a plan that is best for Chicago moving forward as an organization, just not for the quarterback. I guess my pushback would be is that they're actually addressing what you were talking about last season. Matt Nagy was not putting him into a situation to succeed, but it feels like, and I know like there's a long time to go, but it feels like the Bears are moving in that direction. Wouldn't you agree?
It's hard for me to say, right? For example, I was digging in the other day to you've Luke Getsy as your offensive coordinator. Presumably, you're running a version of what they're doing in Green Bay that
Right.
requires a special kind of offensive line. Like every team that has run the Kyle Shanahan offense has revamped their offensive line and has gotten
Mhm.
player specific guys in there. How many of these guys have run outside zone before? How many of these guys are well versed in it? How comfortable is everybody going to be in that situation? I just think it's hard too because you look at the immediacy of it. You look at how fast expectations are arising for young players in these positions. And if you're Justin Fields, you've had a disastrous first year schematically. If you don't have the means to improve significantly your second year, what does the third year look like? I think the second year to me is important. That's where you see most of
Right.
the growth. If you talk to anyone, and I'm not giving this as a lock solid example, but any kind of gambling expert in Las Vegas, they'll say the teams that we bet on are second year quarterbacks because that's where you always see the highest amount of growth, the highest volume of
Right.
growth. Joe Burrow is a great example, right? But what do we see right now that leads us to believe that Justin Fields is going to have more time? He's going to have more ability to develop. He's going to be able to get more comfortable because there were some bad habits that were developed last year.
Right.
What are we seeing now that he's going to have the platform and the opportunity to undevelop those and develop new, better talents, better habits, I should say?
Well, I think going out and signing Lucas Patrick to be the center, somebody who's well versed in this offense. I know they swung and missed with the Bills guard, but again, they got two young tackles that they're now trying out that seem to kind of fit the profile of what Ryan Poles wants to do. They're bringing in an offensive system that's tailor made to Justin Fields. I don't think that you can compare it to what Joe Burrow was walking into last season, where they already had T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, and they added Jamar Chase. He's probably running a year behind, and I know that he's specifically in year 2. He's in the second year of his contract, obviously, but I think that this is still kind of like a rookie season, and it feels like this is a ground floor type of situation where, yeah, he's not going to be able to go out there and have that second year where he's probably going to be in the Super Bowl. But I think if he goes out there and there will be signs that he can play without actually having to go out there and win a bunch of games.
I think ideally that's how it would work, right? But I think we've just seen how many examples have we seen where, progress is glossed over and sacrificed for more of an immediate return. I would say that what's happened to Baker Mayfield in Cleveland has every quarterback's cynicism radar up on 200%. I mean, Baker Mayfield won them their first playoff game since the Cold War, played last year with like a completely separated shoulder, and then they're firing him and replacing him with Deshaun Watson. And, I don't think Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, and I don't think the Bears are that type of organization. But if you're Justin Fields, it's what's in the brain of a young 20s person trying to make a living at this, trying to acquire a generational contract, and you're looking around and you're saying, I don't know what's happening here that's really great for me. I think that's, I always try to put that guy's helmet on and look around and say, like, what makes me super comfortable and super excited about going to work right now?
No, but I think that being a part of something, and I think that, and you've used great examples of like every organization, anybody who's ever taken over an organization always says the right things. Like, this is what we're trying to do. This is we're going to build a winning culture. We're going to do this. And I understand there is some skepticism. And I think the Baker Mayfield situation is one that you need to be worried about. But I think that we've seen that some quarterbacks can still rise above that. I think that, Justin Herbert was able to succeed. I don't think that Anthony Lynn was necessarily giving him a great opportunity to succeed, but we saw that he was a good quarterback. I think Justin Fields, now being in a competent offensive system with an offensive coordinator that's learned that has proven that he can work in this league. I think that I don't know what situations he would be walking into, which would be better. Like if there was a transfer, like what are the jobs? I mean, perhaps if he went to Indianapolis before Matt Ryan got there, I just think, and I think that this is probably the reason the Bears fans are the most upset, is that you do understand that you are pointing out like they're doing the right things. Justin Fields should look at this as a partnership at this point. And I think that sometimes that's where players could benefit, is like you both, like management and the player both have to buy in at this point.
Spoken like a true NFL employee. No, I'm just kidding. I'm messing with you. I'm messing with you. I would say that I would say that this is true in a perfect world, but we are littered with examples where I think that I just think if I'm a player, if I'm an agent, my radar is just up. Like nothing that anyone can promise me beyond, like if they went to them and said, hey, listen, like behind the scenes, like I know verbal promises don't mean anything, but if they tucked him back into a corner of Hallis Hall and said, listen, like this year's going to be tough, just like last year, but you're our guy. Like we promise you that, like we're not, you're not going to hear next off season Adam Schefter talking about us maybe getting Ryan Tannehill or someone else to come in here and run the offense. You're not going to hear any of that. We promise you that. That's great. I have no problem with that. Beyond that, I don't know what is in place for Justin to feel absolutely comfortable. Like, for example, the system is a great system. I've written back and forth about outside zone, probably more than anybody else in the national media. I feel like I have a really good understanding of it, but it's imperfect in that it didn't help Zach Wilson, right away. They're running the same version of an offense. They're in year 2 now of trying to acquire the right personnel to make it happen. We'll see what happens there. But, if I'm Justin Fields, I'm just concerned. That's all. Like, I think if there was a mechanism in place, I would explore it. If I was Justin Fields, like I would say, hey, what's it going to take to get me to Pittsburgh? What's it going to take to get me in a situation where I know that I'll probably be a little bit better taken care of than I am right now?
Yeah. Well, at the same time, then doesn't that mean that like only would we end up in and I guess the NFL is kind of in this situation, but where only the blue bloods get to be the good teams, and then everybody's going to bounce. That anybody that's drafted by the Jets immediately is going to be like, I'm out. Like I'm transfer. I'm accepting the jersey on draft night, and then I'm also entering the transfer portal because the Jets have historically been terrible. I don't know. I think that I kind of like the unofficial way that they're doing it now, because the guys who are transferring, so to speak, have played well on the NFL level. You know what I'm saying? Like they've got to like Russell Wilson can kind of demand his way out of a job. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams for sure. Kyler Murray's even won like a couple of he's had a couple of winning seasons. He's still having trouble figuring out what he's doing, even though they've surrounded him with a lot of talent too. I don't know. Like, how would that work? Like for Kyler Murray, and I know that I'm spreading it thin now, but like they brought in Devontae Adams and AJ Green and built up a defense, and then he's still upset about this. At some point, you got to be like, well, you also have to prove yourself before you can be like, I'm just getting out of here.
I think there's certainly a threshold, right? Like I think, Kyler Murray to me would not constitute. I mean, they hired a coach who's running a system that you've been running since you were 5 years old, right? So I would say that constitutes as like breaking your back to bend over backwards, right? You got DeAndre Hopkins, you paid him $10 million more than any other receiver was getting in the NFL at that point in order to make that transaction happen. I think that there were some pretty wild and outward examples of them bending over backwards. But you brought up an interesting point, and it's something that a Bears fan brought up to me on Twitter and kind of started a sub mini argument outside of the initial argument of this, which was, well, what happens then if you have this transfer portal? Isn't it going to create a situation where there's only 5 or 6 teams that people want to go to? And my response to that would be great, fantastic, because it forces other owners to not be shitty. Like, there are probably 16 or 17 NFL owners that don't show up to their facility every day, that show up on draft day and screw the draft board up, that force coaches to do ridiculous things. I mean, I was talking to someone for a profile of Nathaniel Hackett when he got the Broncos job. And when they were in Jacksonville, he brought Blake Bortles to the AFC title game. And then the next year there was a directive to say we need to be more exciting and throw the ball more. You're telling a guy that brought Blake Bortles to the AFC title game to change his offense. And that's ridiculous, And so I'm just saying, like, all these owners constantly screw things up. And so good. You're going to get punished for it. You're going to learn from your mistakes. You're going to be sick of getting embarrassed, and you're going to create a better and more hospitable place to conduct business. And we worried about this with the NBA, and now we have the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns and all these weird teams with one random superstar winning titles, and I think that's
takes terrible.
It takes getting there to make the whole thing more equitable, I think. And I think owners just need to get woken up.
I think they do. And I think they do need to be held accountable. But I feel, and I don't know if you're taking a shot. I don't think that Virginia can show up to the Bears facility every day. I think that's unfair.
Well, okay. Yeah.
He doesn't need to be required to do that. I think too. And putting myself, we're coming from a Bears perspective. I think because, and in reading this article, and I knew what you were getting at. This is why I did like your point. Like, I do agree. I'm pro player. Like, I agree with like Deebo Samuel. Like, yeah, you don't want to be a running back. You want to play for 15 years. You're not going to do that if you have to run the ball 100 times. And I get that. Like, that part of it's good. I think that our biggest issue is that the Bears are trying. Like, we're legitimately trying to do the right thing. We're trying to put a good organization around him. And you even say, like, they're not, I think there was another part too, where you were talking about like not throwing away money irresponsibly. Like, Ryan Poles didn't go out there and reset the wide receiver market by giving Christian Kirk $90 million. And again, the Bears don't have the draft capital right now to go out there and get Tyreek Hill or to get Deebo, or even, not that Devontae Adams would get traded to the Bears. They can't do that. I think, like, why didn't you pick on the Jets? Is it your like you fear me less than you fear Dan Hanses? Like, the Jets have like 80 picks. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, why aren't they the ones being held to the fire? Like, they're never good. Like, they're never in the playoffs. The Bears were at least in the playoffs 2 out of the last 4 years. We've tried to put together winning organizations. We've tried to build through the draft and do the right things. I think that that's the big thing, is like, why are we sitting? Like, we're just sitting here minding our own business. Justin seems locked in, like ready to go. Like, what are you doing to us?
So here's a full, so this is before the Jaguars hired Urban Meyer, but when the Jets were in line for the number 1 pick last year, I wrote in October that Trevor Lawrence should stay in college because you just shouldn't go to the Jets. You shouldn't play there. They have never developed a quarterback in modern history. Ownership is a mess. Like, don't go there. And then all these Jets fans were tweeting me throughout the season and being like, oh, the Jaguars are better. I didn't know they were going to bring in an insane person who didn't prepare for the, I didn't know they were bringing in Urban Meyer. I would have said to definitely stay in college. Then don't go to any of these teams. So I've picked on the Jets. I've been in trouble. I think the Jets are in year 2 of this. And if you're Zach Wilson and you're Justin Fields sitting there, would you rather an offensive line that is now 2 years into the system? Would you rather a GM who made the swing to try to get Tyreek Hill? You missed, but you're thinking big. You already have acquired some talent via free agency. Like, you've shown the willingness to, the hard part is already over, right? And now it's the time to reap, right? And you get CJ Uzoma, which everybody was saying doesn't matter, but I think was one of the best pass blocking tight ends in the NFL last year.
If the Bears had signed CJ Uzoma,
I'm not saying that's it.
They would have been like, oh, there they are signing another tight end again. We would have harangued for that.
That's true. That's I forgot that was a soft spot.
Little too close to home.
That's true. But I feel like there is if I were one of those 2 quarterbacks, I would be less paranoid. Because I think that the Bears are still in the active rebuilding phase, right? Like, the foundation of the house isn't finished yet. And so if I'm Zach, it's like, okay, I know this is all on me now. Like, if I don't perform, I'm screwed up. I'm done for, but that's on me. Justin Fields still, it's kind of like, if I have a bad season, everyone's going to think I'm a bad quarterback, but is that necessarily the case? And the water's going to kind of be muddy on that, like it's not all on him if he has a bad season, it's a fair point. And so I would ask if you are either Justin Fields or Zach Wilson, and you put on that hat of that 22-year-old, 23-year-old guy. Justin Fields came into the NFL last year and was lied to and hung out to dry. Do we agree with that?
That's 100%. Yes.
Okay. So when the next guy comes in and says, we're building this the right way around you, is there a part of you in the back of your mind that says, the last time someone told me this, I was lied to and hung out to dry? And when people tell other quarterbacks this around the NFL, they're also lied to and hung out to dry. Is there a part of you in the back of your mind that's like, everybody says the right thing, but I just don't know? Versus if you're Zach Wilson, I'm just saying you arrive, you come in, and I'm not saying that any of this is the right thing to do.
No,
I'm just saying you arrive, you come in, they bring in Mike LaFleur, who was a head coaching candidate, well-regarded, hot coordinator. You bring in the offensive line coach, which in that system is more important than the offensive coordinator. Like that was to get John Benton was a coup, viewed as a coup in that situation, right? You have draft capital and cap space coming on the back end. You sign like Corey Davis. You then, you make all these, you bring in John Beck, who is his private quarterbacks coach, to come in and translate the offense for him. You make the effort to trade for Tyreek Hill, which again, point taken. And you should take your wife on a nice vacation, by the way.
I would, I would like to, but yeah.
Which guy probably sleeps better at night right now? And if there is a transfer portal option that exists, which guy is kind of just like thumbing through the available real estate in other markets, and which guy isn't? That's kind of the question that I'm asking. Like Zach Wilson is probably like, if it doesn't work, at least everybody's trying, it seems like everyone's trying. But if I'm Justin Fields, I'm probably so jaded from what happened last year. And I understand it's a different group of people, but I think that people have to understand the scars that this stuff leaves, on players that just bounce from team to team, situation to situation. If I'm him, I'm just sort of damaged goods in a way, just because it's like, I'm worried about what's going to happen here. They hire a defensive head coach again. I mean, I thought the Eberflus hire was great. We've been at the MMQB, we've been writing that teams should hire him since 2017. I thought it was a great hire. I'm just saying, if I'm him, I'm looking at it and being like, okay, we have no idea what this left tackle is going to look like. That's scary to me. We don't have a first round draft pick to go and get a tackle. That's scary to me. Allen Robinson's gone. Who's going to win me some of these balls that, he would have won me, in different situations. So that's probably where my head's at. Right. And if there is a chance to go to other places, a mechanism in place that existed, I would be looking if I were him. That's all. I would say, hey, because it's him. It's at the end of the day, it's his little stat line on Pro Football Reference is that something that he's got to wear on his chest. Ryan Poles doesn't have to wear that. Ryan Poles can win Executive of the Year next year after going if they go 3-14 this year, which I'm not saying they will, but he can win Executive of the Year next year by having a bad season, acquiring draft capital, getting themselves back on sound financial footing, and then getting like a Sam Darnold deal for Justin Fields on the back end, and then he doesn't have to worry about it. Justin Fields has to wear that stat line, and then he has to show up somewhere else, damaged goods. And that's a hard place to be in the NFL. It's a really, really hard place to be.
No, it's difficult. And a lot of what you're saying is absolutely correct. And, obviously the Jets have gone through quarterbacks as much as the Bears have. Sam Darnold's gone to Carolina. How did that benefit him? I would just look at it. If I'm Justin Fields, and I get exactly what you're saying, I don't think that he was necessarily lied to. He was just never given an opportunity. I think that last year they had Andy Dalton in place, and he got all the first team reps. They did not gear this offense around him. To me, this has got to be a different experience. Like, it has got to be night and day compared to last season, where, last year you were almost like, I don't know if Matt Nagy resented him being there, but Matt Nagy was already with somebody else. Andy Dalton was his guy. You might get a couple of plays here and there. He comes into that Rams game in week 1, looks like a good quarterback, and you're like, God, that would have been nice to have seen him get a full rep in the offseason. Nothing was catered for him. Like, he was just there. Like, you're the assistant that somebody hired, and they tell you to go sit in the corner while everybody else is doing work. And you're like, well, I'd like to do something. You're like, well, you sit there and you just keep your mouth shut. We'll throw you into a Cleveland game, not design anything for you. Instead, this year, now, I understand your overarching point about, like, why would you trust Poles? I would trust him more than I would trust Ryan Pace. If they had kept the general manager, that is where I think you would be absolutely correct in what you're saying, where, like, I would never trust that MF ever again after what happened to me my rookie season. I think that if I'll put him in this headspace, and listen, we've worked in an industry where there's a lot of turnover. And me personally, I always give a benefit of the doubt to anybody who comes in. John Marvel, one of our former bosses, when he was brought in, I bought into what he said immediately. And I'd gone through a number of bosses, and I'm like, okay, I'm buying in. Like, I'm going to give him 1 year to earn my trust, which he did. And he ended up being one of the best bosses I ever worked with. And I think that where Justin is right now, I think that and just knowing his background and knowing the way his family is, I think that they would do that. They would be like, okay, Ryan Poles is coming in. He's saying the right things. I have no reason not to believe him right now. And I think that given the situation and everything that's kind of in front of them, is like, I'll allow it. Like, everything's getting catered to me. I'm the number one guy. It's not questioned. They didn't bring in a veteran backup. They didn't bring in Marcus Mariota to back me up. They're not bringing in Baker Mayfield. They didn't bring in anybody. They brought in Trevor Siemian, who's not a threat to anybody's job. There's somebody there who's just to be somebody that I can rely on. I think that the situation's worked out. And you know what? We haven't seen what they're going to do in the draft. So there might be a lot more stuff left to go. So I think that I appreciate what you've been writing, and I agree, but I think that, this is a brand new situation with a brand new general manager. And I think that he's just got I think we just have to give him a chance to go out there and prove what he's saying.
Yeah. And I think part of the criticism of the piece was that it was too early on. And, I thought about that while I was writing it. But I would just say, like, it's not too early if you're Justin Fields, because of what we had said before. Like, you've already had a rough ride in the NFL. You've already had your wake-up call. And so what I'm saying is, maybe you're approaching Ryan Poles with, the hair on the back of your neck still standing up, right? You're still in that, like, aggressive stance. You're like, okay, what's happening here? But maybe you allow it some time. But I would say that my hand's always on the eject button there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that it's just going to be that way for a little while. I mean, I've talked to players who have endured, full on, and I hope Bears fans don't equate this. I'm not saying this is a tanking situation, but
No.
I've talked to players who have endured that full on tanking situation. We look at how unfixably screwed up Tua Tagovailoa is right now in Miami, for example. And it's like, I'm just worried that that's going to happen to me, and I think that it's a fair concern. I think, in the NFL, there's such that fine window between developmental prospect and trash heap backup, and as soon as you hit that cliff and go off, there's no coming back, right? There's no earning generational money. There's no, $50 million a year contract extension. And so you have to be so precious with all of those years very early on in your rookie contract. I mean, it's, I keep going back to Baker Mayfield, but like, that guy is not, is going to play for peanuts in 2023. And he won the Browns' first playoff game since, 1980?
Since Brian Sipe? Bernie Kosar?
Probably, yeah. So it's like, okay,
Vinny Testaverde maybe, but yeah, it's been a while. Would you say, though, talking about this and, you think about Trevor Lawrence, should Trevor Lawrence be a little should he be a little scared? I mean, like, you saw what happened to Blake Bortles after he got his team to the AFC Championship game, even though you brought in Doug Peterson. Well, Doug Peterson's a guy who won a Super Bowl by ejecting off of the second overall pick in the draft and going with Nick Foles. Should Trevor Lawrence be concerned, or what do you think there?
I think Trevor Lawrence is in a situation where they were so scared of, they were so concerned about his developmental arc that they took an embarrassingly large swing at the head coaching situation the first time. I think that they're so scared about his developmental arc that they made the safest choice they possibly could on the head coaching market the second time. And I think that they're so legitimately terrified about screwing him up as a prospect that they are overspending, they're overreaching. And again, is that the best for overall organizational health? I don't know. That's a tough thing to say. I mean, they have to, they're in a different situation too, because they have to spend some of that money, right? Some of that money has to be gone. And the Christian Kirk deal is bad, but it is get outable pretty quickly, And so I would say, like, if I'm Trevor Lawrence, it's an interesting place to put these three: Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Fields. Like, from Trevor Lawrence, I'm like, okay, I feel better about giving this a year than Justin Fields given this a year, personally, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this is what I see. And Trevor Lawrence, I think, is also in a very different position where he came out as the established heir apparent John Elway. And if the Jaguars screw this up, it's LOL Jaguars, right? It's not, and I think he would get generational money to go play somewhere else.
Right.
I don't think Justin Fields has that luxury necessarily.
Yeah, I look at it though, where I don't know. I think that if the Bears had gone out and done everything that Jacksonville has done, they would get dinged for that. Like, oh, here come the Bears. Same old story, new Ryan in town, and yet he's doing the same things and throwing away money and spending all this draft capital for old guys. I don't know. And again, I'm very biased because I'm a Bears fan, and I in addition to like seeing what's happening, I also want it to happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's the Bears fan in us who's like, we understand what he's doing and we want that to be successful. Maybe not looking at it as critically as we should, but I still think, and again, we'll see what happens a week from now or where we stand 10 days from now and what the receiver room looks like, what the offensive line looks like. I almost feel better about building from scratch. And I think that that's a better, I don't know. I see that of the Jags, the Jets, and the Bears, for, again, a very biased view. Like, I see the Bears as the most credible organization of the three. They've been more competitive, even though the Jags, well, they got to the championship in 2017. The Bears did make the playoffs in 2019 and 2021. I think the Bears are a better franchise, and I don't know. That, to me, just stands out a little bit more of like, all right, I'm willing to give this another shot. Plus, it feels like the organization is building in the right way, because I think when Ryan Pace came in, and I've always said that, like, Ryan Pace died so Ryan Poles could move forward. Like, you've seen the Bears add to their staff. Like, they didn't have an assistant general manager before. Now they have Ian Cunningham. They're adding to their analytics department. They're adding to their football staff. They're actually making positive signs, which to me, as a young man, I would probably be like, okay, this is cool. I think I can work with this going forward. I think the Bears are in the right direction, though.
I would say this. I would say it's an interesting question, and we've been debating this a lot at the office, right? The tear down, full-scale rebuild versus what we've seen the last two Super Bowl champions do, some kind of version of, right? And does the full-scale rebuild actually work? Does it actually happen anymore? Or have we seen general managers artfully circumvent the process to the point where we shouldn't have to expect that or endure that anymore, right? And I know that the Buccaneers, for example, it took a long time of them being bad to get Mike Evans and to get Vita Vea and to get, all those guys. And you were one quarterback away because you were bad for a couple of years. And I understand that. But, like, Sean McVay made a very, very bad Rams team competitive in a year. Like, I think there are coaches now that the NFL is such that I think that you could win with a mediocre roster, and that I think that the strategy at this point has evolved to the point where you're seeing a picks don't matter strategy pay off in a really significant way. And so you could argue those two things back and forth, right? Is there a merit to what Ryan Poles is doing long term? Or if you're Justin Fields, are you looking at this and saying Goff and them got better in a year and they just started trading crazy capital and spending crazy money and getting all these stars, and Jared Goff got to the Super Bowl after bottoming out with Jeff Fisher, like 2 years after bottoming out with Jeff Fisher? Is that me? Or is that, is that the pace that this thing is heading at? Or is it, is it something different? And so I think that there are a lot of different general manager philosophies now, but I think that quarterbacks, owners, and us all see that this can happen a whole lot faster than we've been told that it happens in the past, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you're sitting here talking about that, that's what's giving me hope, is that obviously Sean McVay is the offensive wizard, but is Eberflus the guy who's going to come in and put in a culture and identity to this Bears team that's going to get them competitive a lot quicker than normally? I mean, if you have a coach that has accountability and you have a defense that's better and you have an offense that has a system designed for the quarterback, I think that can turn around and be successful. And I think that, one of the things that was great about the Rams is how well they drafted. Remember, I know you know this, but a lot of people forget. Well, Bears fans know this because Aaron Donald was mocked 14th to the Bears in every single mock draft, from Bucky Brooks, Daniel Jeremiah, everybody had Aaron Donald going to the Bears. And it was a shock that the Rams took him at 13. They had Chris Long, they had Bobby Quinn at the time. They didn't need defensive line. They had a lot of other needs. They took Aaron Donald. So you get to this luxurious position of being able to then trade away your draft picks and bring in Jalen Ramsey and Leonard Floyd and Odell Beckham Jr. when you have a good foundation. And I guess if you're counting on Justin Fields being good, if you're counting on the 2 tackles that they drafted last year being good, if these guys develop, you have a roster. You're like, okay, we've got some pieces in there. And I think that, given the landscape of the NFC, perhaps the Bears do come out and are a little bit competitive. Obviously not of the upper card of the, the Buccaneers and the Packers and the Rams, but still, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's an interesting argument. I would say from a Bears fan perspective, I get it. There is always a sensitivity with new GMs and coaches because I believe this too. I mean, I am, most of what I do centers around, reporting on new coaches, new executives, what makes it work, what doesn't work. And so I understand the excitement. I understand the defensiveness. I would say that if you are sitting there and you're saying, okay, well, what if the tackles work? And what if the system works? And what if and if I'm a quarterback whose livelihood depends on certainties versus what ifs, I'm just a little bit nervous. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, listen, I know you got to run. We appreciate all the time that you've taken with us here today. We will welcome you back. I'm always happy to have you on. Always happy to talk to you. I hope I'm
cool with Bears fans now, by the way.
No, we're talking shit on you once you leave. I will tell you that I'll still get you Madden codes and everything. Like, don't have to worry about that. We're still cool. Bears fans, I don't know. I'll try to smooth everything over after you leave, but I know you got an interview to do right now. We thank you for doing that. And we really appreciate it. I think you're a good guy. And I think this was a great conversation. So thank you so much for coming by. No, I appreciate you, Connor. All right, get out of here so we can talk bad about it. There he goes, the great Connor Orr. Again, like, I think it's a philosophical thing that we're talking about, and I really appreciate his point of view. And I did really like the story, and I think that, again, going back to the overarching point of the NFL should be allowed. If your organization is not doing right by you, you should have the opportunity to go out there and benefit your situation. I think that our point, and I think this is where the Bears fans are coming from, is that we want it. And again, this is coming from a want. We want the Bears to be successful. We want all these picks to hit. I really do, honest to God, believe, and I would say this to anybody, that I would play this out. I look at Carolina, I look at Seattle, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a little bit tough. Like I could see like, yeah, I want to go to Pittsburgh. Like, yeah, I understand. Well, we'd have to bring Mitch back, but in any event, I think that, and I hope this is what Justin Fields sees, is that this is a situation that will benefit him in the long run. That if they are doing the correct things, which I believe that they are, that at some point this will all pay off. The Bears will once again be the kings of the North, and it'll be the benefit of Justin for sticking it out. And that's the big thing. So I get what Connor was saying. I hope that, listen, and anybody who is here tuning in, hoping that I was going to take wild swings at my friend, I was not going to do that. We gave him the benefit of the doubt. He expressed his views. I expressed mine. We walk away friends. Listen, I like all the guys that you guys in the Bears fandom don't always like. I know everybody's mad. Well, maybe not Pro Football Talks, Michael Florio, who is just being the whole notion of like they're trying to sabotage, like at least that's not what Connor was saying. Like he's not saying like the Bears are trying to sabotage him or tanking. That's where Michael Florio was coming from. But I think the Bears are on the right track. And I think that, again, we'll discuss this next year. If it looks like it is not going in the right direction, we can revisit this. But ultimately, I think the Bears are on the right path. I appreciate Connor's point of view, appreciate your input. But I think Justin's fine. I think we're fine. And I think overall, in the long run, this relationship between Ryan Poles, Justin Fields, Matt Eberflus, I think it's going to end up being a winning combination. And we still have got, a draft coming up a week from now that we'll be able to discuss that as well. So I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. Sorry, I know there was a couple of audio hiccups. So thankfully, Sammy is a wizard, and you probably won't even notice. And if you do, we apologize. Next week is the draft. We'll be able to we'll get into the draft and break down some of the picks. We might have a little bit of a different schedule, but we will be with you next week. Take it to the rank. We'll return on Tuesday. By the way, nothing serious. I was on Total Access Tuesday night. I had a comedy show at the Clubhouse in Orange County. The timing wise just didn't quite work out, but thanks to everybody who is concerned and everything like that. But we'll be back for Take It to the Rank this week. We'll have a great guest for you. Don't know who it is yet, but we'll have a great guest because we always do. But until that time, bear down. And Sammy, why don't you play us out?
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.